I'm going to ask our panelists to come on up as I talk for just a moment or two about doing business with the federal government and doing business development with the federal government. A little bit about my business. In addition to founding ALVA, I'm also a business owner. I founded my company, Vargas Solutions, in 2004, about the same time that Jackie started her business. And we do marketing, public relations, strategic communications, and management consulting for several federal agencies, including, we did for 9 years, we managed the minority internship program for the U.S. Department of Energy. We have a similar program with the VA as well. But one of the ways to be able to do that is to take advantage of the tools that you have at your disposal. As a small business owner, I was able to get into the 8A program. That's how we were able to leverage that certification to get that contract with the Department of Energy. We just got our Hub Zone certification recently, so we're looking to leverage that as well as our GSA schedule. But fortunately, we've got some incredible experts here on the panel today, beginning with one of our advisory council members, Ibarra, who's the CTO at PingWind. We've got Eric Gonzales, who's a VP of Growth and Client Development at Aptive Resources, as well as Beverly Beavers, who's CEO of Procliv-IT. So I'm going to ask each one to take just a couple of moments to tell us about their background and what they do at their companies and their relationship with the federal government, Luis.
Well, easy. I'm the CTO of PingWind, so I'm the chief nerd there. We are a small, stable, small business. We also have a successful actual joint venture with Paraton. We're doing really well with that. The good thing with that, on both sides that the gentleman was explaining before, is that it also allows the large business to go after small business. So it helps you dual track your success as you go after small business stuff and stuff that they wouldn't have gone after. They can now come up and do as a joint venture.
Yeah, so Eric Gonzales. I am also with a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, also a woman-owned small business. Been supporting the federal government on the health IT side for about 13 years now. About half on the program delivery side, starting out in acquisitions, supporting the VA acquisition enterprise, and then the other half in business development and capture.
Good afternoon. I'm Beverly Beavers. I am a retired medical service corps officer, retired just about 3 years ago. After retirement, spent a couple of years in industry with Cerner and Accenture, and then in July decided to break away and run my company, Procliv-IT. And so I'm about 4 months into that journey of being a woman-owned small business, going after my SWAM certification, and then an SDVOSB.
Excellent. So, in addition to what I described earlier about Hub Zone and 8A, we're also a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. So all of those certifications are great. They're wonderful to have. They're hard to get sometimes, but they don't guarantee a single thing, right? So if we can just go down the panel and just based on your own experiences, just talk a little bit about how to be able to utilize those tools, those arrows in your quiver, if you will, to be able to position your company to be able to capture some of those contracts where they might have a desire or a need for a set aside, but it's not guaranteed that it's going to be your company or your offering. So please,
Well, you know, being on the business development, being on the nerd side, right, I come at it from a different angle. Business development is multi-dimensional. You have people that, you know, like Eric here, that specialize on it, growth and capture. But coming at it from the technology side, I use that differently. So when I approach the customer, it's about the problem, the technology, the solution. What is it that they want to solve? So that when I get their attention, they ask me, well, how do I get, I like what you're saying, I like your solution, how do I get to you? How is it that I can get you to come do that work? And that's where I use those social economic statuses, right, to kind of get us that work. That's mine. The BD and capture have to, you know, they're very involved in that business development process. That's how I use it. It's not a guarantee, but I use the technology piece aspect of it and use that as a tie-in to tell the customer, this is how you can get us to come do the work.
That's an excellent approach. So Eric, from your perspective, how were you able to use those tools to go again?
Yeah, absolutely. So my primary customer for the past 13 years has been the Department of Veterans Affairs. Recently, in 2016, there was a law that was passed called Kingdomware, if you're familiar with it. Some people call it the Rule of Two. That means that all procurements have to come out first as an RFI. So the government has to release a request for information, and then if two service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses respond to that RFI and they're both capable in their response of performing the work, then it has to go set aside. So in the VA in the last 6 years, we've seen a shift going from large business, a lot of fair opportunity deals coming out set aside. And that's even on, 9-figure deals. We've seen deals as big as, $300-400 million go set aside because the companies that responded to the RFI were capable of performing the work. So again, you'll see a lot of the same themes from the other panels throughout the day, but just having those socioeconomic statuses in your tool belt, right? Get as many as you possibly can. Some are a lot less cumbersome to get than others, but self-certifications aren't really working anymore. So you'll have to work with SBA, you'll have to get all the designations you can, and then really just market yourself to large vendors that are in that space, a lot of primes too. So you can go out on any agency that you're focused on, go out online, do a search, find all the prime vendors in there. So for VA, the big IT services contract is called T4NG. So they spend about $2.5 billion on that annually. So go out there and just do a search for who are all the T4NG prime vendors, right? Go make friends with those vendors. Tell them, hey, I'm in you, whatever you are, whether it's woman-owned, 8A, minority-owned, and kind of what you're able to bring to that. And then, as Luis said, cozy up with them, make friends, try to work that mentor-protege agreement, joint ventures, and kind of take that avenue too, because these large businesses now in the space will benefit from having small business partners. They have to. It's mandated by the federal government that they have to award a certain percentage of dollars to service-disabled companies, women-owned companies, 8As, small disadvantaged businesses, all that stuff. So, yeah, that's better for me.
Okay, if I can add to that, so also understand that socioeconomic status, right? So like we've been mentioning hub zones quite a bit. That's a tough one because not only does your company have to be in a hub zone, you also have to hire people that live in the hub zone to be able to do it. That's a tough requirement to meet, which is why you've been hearing a lot of people here talking about hub zones and why it's a good opportunity. So understand what you're getting yourself into with the socioeconomic statuses as well.
It actually took us quite a long time to finally get ourselves hub zone certification. You're right, so it's a challenge. Beverly?
Well, I think having been the customer, one of the things that I see now on this side of the table is, like Eric just mentioned, the marketing, advertising, getting out and knowing your community of where the customer is at, as well as where you can find the partners to team with. And then being able to have a strategy that is going to keep you on track and not allow you to get lost in the swirl of all of the many things that are out there that you may not be ready to chase yet. And as I'm getting started, that's where I feel like I'm actually learning a lot about myself. I'm used to being able to go at a pretty fast pace with the teams that I've worked with in the past. And now you really have to learn the craft. And I mean, some of your comments about the statistics that you just gave show just how much you know about the community. And those are things that you have to spend a lot of time doing, the reading, the research, and knowing what has happened, if things are in protest and why, and when new acts and policies come out. So there's a lot of self-education that you have to be willing to put in place.
That's an excellent point, and especially when it comes to the marketing, it sort of dovetails back to a little bit of what Luis was talking about earlier. Some of these socioeconomic and certifications and so forth, they're great in terms of providing the buyer, the government in this case, a way to be able to get to you, but you still have to have something to offer, right? There has to be a what and a why, right? For them to want to do business with you. The certifications and the vehicles might be an easy way to do the how to do business with you. So why don't we go backwards a little bit, Beverly? Since you brought up the market, let's start with you and talk about how you're positioning your company vis-a-vis what the needs of the government are, and as well as the competition, because it's not in a vacuum, right? So.
Right. So, you want to be able to turn left and right to your brother and sister who are also starting their companies, and if they're 6 months ahead of you or a year ahead of you, they're swimming in other lanes already. And so being able to really kind of stay close to where you are great at your craft, I think is very important. And then searching out a company, or maybe two, but probably not much more than that, that will give you the ability to be mentored and understand their processes and give you some of that room to grow and give you opportunities to bring things to the table. Being able to start to build your bench around where you want to find the team members you're going to bring to the environment that you're growing, I think is also something that I'm realizing takes a lot longer sometimes than I thought. Just because I have a lot of experience in an area doesn't mean that I can go and find the right people to come in and help grow my company the way that I would like to go at the pace I would like to go.
Yeah, so I've worked for like micro, small, startup, veteran-owned companies, minority-owned companies. At a couple of them, I was the single-digit, like 7th employee. Also worked for Fortune 500, huge, 40, 50,000 person fund companies. So I learned way more at the smalls, obviously, because when you are that small, you wear a ton of hats, right? You're not just a single resource pigeonholed into a thing. And at those smalls, I mean, there were times when people had no idea who we were, or what we did, or anything like that. So again, common theme that you've seen throughout the day is just networking, right? So there was a time back in 2016, I was at a very small company. We won a very large IDIQ, and it was kind of like a Cinderella story, right? No one thought we would win it, we did. So now we have this contract vehicle that has a ton of potential. Like, what do we do with it? No one knows who we are, what we do. So we would literally go on to like G2 Exchange or Fed Health IT or some of these other kind of GovCon media blogs that are out there that are free services. You can just register for them. And we would see what are events. They have events pages, and they'll show you every single event that's happening in the DC metro area, outside of it. Some of them are networking, some of them are focused on agencies, some aren't. We would go to every single thing so we could meet as many people as we could. Hopefully they liked us, because usually you want to do business with people that you like, so that's what we did. We hung out with people, we bought drinks for people, we did everything we could to really market ourselves as that company. And there were times too where we were invited on the teams, not because of what our actual company brought as a capability, because we were so small, we didn't have that capability, but because they liked who we were as people and as a company and kind of what we stood for, and they wanted to give us a shot. And you'll get that a lot in this industry, companies that are willing to kind of take a chance on other companies because they like the people that are actually there. And then, once you get to a certain place, you can always remember that, you can pay it back. I mean, there was a time 2 years ago when I met, I met some guys, they were great. There was 2 of them, it was an SDVOSP, new startup. I liked what they did. I was at a big company at the time, we won a big program. We gave them a few bodies just because we enjoyed, hanging out with them. And that kind of catapulted them and gave them past performance. And since then, in the past few years, they've grown pretty significantly. But yeah, just market yourself. Because when you're out there doing business development, I mean, people are seeing you, right? Like, you're the face of the company. So if you always want to, be the good story. Don't be the story that people are talking about, the next day.
But in your case, Lou, I think it's a little bit different because you've got a significant capability from technology.
Right, so I was going to say, so the marketing capability side, it's different because I'm the guy that BD comes to and say, hey, we're going to go after this, right? Come up with the solution, come up with the answer. But so I was one of the CTOs at GDIT before I came over to this company, and I've been there maybe a little less than a year. And my thing there was, who are we? What is it that we, because you can't just go and bid for everything and just, roll the dice. we need to figure out as a company, what is it that we support in technology? What are we good at? What is the core thing that we do? And so it has allowed us in the last few months to kind of define where we're sitting on and go after those opportunities. And we are now experiencing tremendous growth. And now with our JV with Peraton, they've also seen that transition. So they've come over and helped us go after other deals because they're like, okay, now we see a vision of where you guys are heading technology-wise. Now we can go after all these other things and start building that infrastructure with proposal writing and contracting, building our BD so that when we go after these bigger deals, we now have the infrastructure to also be competitive and support the big company that we're a joint venture with. So it's been different, and for the marketing piece for me is let's market what we do, who we are as a technology piece, and that's very different from on the BD side, right? Because I get BD that comes, hey, we're going to go after this deal. It's like we don't even have that capability. What are you talking about? We could write something, we could get our nerd on and write something on there, but we want to deliver.
Yeah. So that brings up the sort of dichotomy, right? So part of it is being focused about what you do, what your capabilities are, and building those internal strengths, right? But then, secondly, I mean, so in addition to government contracting, I also have my commercial clients. A lot of them are government contracting companies where I help them position themselves vis-a-vis the marketplace and the competition. So part of it is, yes, saying who you are and what you do, but the other side of it is the segmentation and targeting. So that means being focused in terms of who you're going after as well, right? So being focused about what you do and what you offer, but also being very focused about who you're going after. So Eric, how does that sort of inform what your efforts are in terms of being selective about the different types of agencies that you're going after as it relates to what your core capabilities are and then who you're going after? Because you can't go after everybody.
Right, yeah. So for new companies, I mean, I think starting out and picking like one or two agencies, right? Like that's where I've seen the most success for companies when you try to spread yourself too thin. I mean, even looking at like one agency, I mean, if you're targeting like Health and Human Services, I mean, they have so many sub-agencies under there. I mean, they're each like almost, you know, their own animal. Like when you look at like big companies, like a Leidos or a Mantech or a GDIT, like they have sometimes multiple like account execs or like BDs in a single agency, right? So say you're looking at like the Department of Veterans Affairs, you'll have someone over their OINT and their Veterans Health Administration, their Veterans Benefits Administration. So you have like 3-4 people working these accounts, right? So if you're a small business, limited resources, you'll want to kind of pick a sweet spot. And whether it's, you know, healthcare or, you know, DOD or something that you can kind of speak to from your background, like stick with what you know at first, right? That's not necessarily where you're going to end up. I mean, because you might luck into something, you might, you know, swing for the fences, get a bluebird, and then now you're doing this other stuff. So the company that I'm with right now, we were inherently more of like a healthcare company supporting the Department of Veterans Affairs on the health side and a strategic comms company. But we kind of won this big IDIQ as an IT company, and we won our first real big IT contract, which was a cloud deal. We never thought we would have been doing anything with like cloud and network engineering stuff, but like here we are. So, you know, we're starting to partner up with like AWS and Azure and some of the other technology partners, and we're working with them and we're doing some things. So that might completely change the way that our IT line of business is going to go, right? If it was something we won in like the DevSecOps or like cybersecurity or something, that would kind of take us where we would go. But right now we were kind of a green space, right? Because IT wasn't a big core competency, and now we're looking to go there. So, so yeah, I would stick with what you are comfortable with at first, but you never know where you might end up. But yeah, you want to be focused in a single area, but you know, depending on your exit strategy, whether or not you want to be like a lifestyle company and be comfortable and be, you know, in it for a long time, or if you're just trying to build something up big and then sell it off quickly, like know what your plan is, you know, like your 5, 10, 15-year plan, whatever you plan on doing, and then just kind of, you know, align your priorities around that.
How about you? You're recently starting out. Have you been targeting specific agencies?
Yes, so I finished up my career in the Defense Health Agency, and then, like I mentioned, spent the 3 years now in industry. So I have been watching that environment in the DHA and looking at places where I can team with other companies for work there, but have also had the opportunity, because of peer relationships, been able to partner now on a couple of things in the VA, and I'm hoping that that is going to prove to be a place where I can start to grow. I'm also taking Eric's advice and trying not to go too much thinner than that for the next 12 to 24 months. I'm not going to shut doors when opportunities present themselves, but again, I'm trying to listen to people who have mentored me, who have said not to be stretching myself too thin, especially while I'm still just a team of one, and building a long-term strategy that will allow me to think about how I want to hire my first cyber resource and my first HR finance resource, and try to be pretty deliberate about those things.
Are we allowed to ask Pam?
Sure.
I'm just curious. She used to be my customer, so I know her really well. Has it been helpful for you, like, now that you started your business, like, you have all these relations, like DHA, right? Knowing the people that are doing the work, has that helped you out?
It has helped me out, but at the same time, you know, it's very easy to look at hindsight and look at a lot of the junior military members and GS customers that I mentored and coached along the way. And I wish I would have done a better job of helping them understand everything industry does for us. And so I think now what I find myself doing when I can get one-on-one time with a lot of those friends or those that I mentored and coached before is showing them what I've learned in industry, so that they will ask me questions and give me a chance to be a sounding board for them about where their hesitations are to work with industry. Because in a 3-year time period, I've learned so much now being on this side of the table. And I thought that I knew a lot about working with industry and partnering with industry, but I probably could have done a lot more if I had had a little bit more discipline in how I was working with industry.
It's different on this side.
It is. It's a lot different.
So part of it is who you know also, right?
Right, exactly.
So that networking piece, but I want to turn it around a little bit for you, Louise, because there's a reason why there's a difference between sales and business development, right? So I think to a certain extent, business development is more about thinking strategically and being more about playing the chess game as opposed to just being reactive and agile and so forth. I think there's room for both. I think there's room for being reactive to a given opportunity that presents itself because of your network, but there's also a need sometimes to be more sort of forward thinking and playing the chess game and knowing that there's going to be an RFP coming out in the next 6 to 12 months, and then positioning yourself with your partners and your capabilities to go after it. But so take a minute, if you don't mind, Louise, and talk about that sort of strategic long-term business development view towards going after something that might be transformative for the company.
You know, BD is an art. I mean, I have a lot of respect for my BD team, capture team. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort going in there trying to, because it is a long game, right? You have to go talk to the customer, understand the customer, understand who are the incumbents currently doing the work, right? Get any insight into how are they doing, if you're going after a deal, if they're doing bad or doing good. These are all things I don't worry about, right? Like, you guys do your magic, and when you need me to do mine, I'll come step in and do mine. But it is an awkward work, and it's a long game. And I have no, although BD is multidimensional, my part of it is, you know, I go in there, I help support them, or I might know because I've been in the industry for so long, I might know a particular customer or a particular little nerd that's sitting out there that kind of can help us, right, get some insight. And so we all play a role in there, but by far the BD and capture team and growth do the bigger chunk of it. I just kind of sit on the sidelines and wait for them to come and need my help. So,
yeah. and that's part of it too, right? Just
right.
Making sure that as you move into that next 12 to 18 to 24 months of making sure that you're prepared to go after this big field, that you've got the core capabilities to be able to do it.
Yeah, and that's key, right? Having the core capabilities, having be able to do the work, not just go after just because you can.
Right. It's the great news is that we won, and the terrible news is, oh my God, we won. Now what do we do? Eric, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, you know, planning, like what we do, like what Luis was mentioning, so like we have like capture plans, so we have like a capture workbook. So kind of getting that process in place and looking at big opportunities. And, you know, you won't always know all the opportunities that are going to be coming out, right? There are like pop-ups and stuff that kind of comes out of nowhere. But again, use the tools that are available to you, like the free tools. Like you can use sam.gov, right? There's a bunch of filters on there for contract opportunities, and you can set them up. So you go to sam.gov, there's a section that says contract opportunities. You can look up things, so click all your socioeconomic statuses so you have those, so you know what's going to be coming out. That'll be more limited competition. And then you can even search on things depending on what you're doing, whether it's IT, whether it's, you know, project management stuff, comms, whatever it is. You can set those filters, and it'll show you everything that's going to be coming up, or that's an RFI that's publicly available. So, you know, do that. Try to get in front of things as much as you can. Again, with BD, so BD is kind of like the tip of the spear for opportunities, right? So looking at BD and capture and solutions kind of as a whole. And BD always kind of assumes risk, right? Like we want to go out there, we want to talk to everyone. Someone's like, I got this great deal. And we're like, that sounds awesome. We're going to do that. And then we go to capture and solutions, and they're like, well, hold on, like we don't do this. And it's like, but they say that's great. And it's like, you know, so there's always that kind of balance, right? So like the capture team and the solutions team will mitigate that risk and say, okay, you know, have we talked to the customer? Yes. Like what, you know, is the current incumbent doing well? You know, yeah, they are, but they're not doing this, right? It's like status quo. So then, you know, someone like Luis and his team would come in and be like, all right, so where can we kind of take them into the next level, right? Like where can we differentiate ourselves with a solution that's going to make our proposal stand out and be more technically superior than like an incumbent or something, because we don't have, you know, that story to tell. So, you know, kind of working all of those pieces, doing a call plan. So, I mean, a lot of what I do too is I go on LinkedIn, right? And say if we're looking to get at someone in VA or DHA or something, and we know, hey, they're in this office. So I'll just go into the search bar and I'll be like, you know, we were looking up the customers for this IPv6 deal in VA. I typed in VA IPv6 and we found some people, and that was in their, you know, their little blurb on their LinkedIn, and we're like, okay, this is a guy in that office. We start hitting them up on there, and we try to get to them and say, hey, are you willing to take a conversation with us? And that sort of thing. So just really using all like the little, you know, again, free things that are available to you, because, you know, small businesses don't have a ton of startup funds usually. And then just trying to get in front of it and do as much upfront work as possible. Like you'll never want to go to a customer, if you do land that customer meeting for an opportunity, as like a BD person or anyone else, and say like, hey, like, tell me your pain points. Like they absolutely hate that. Like customers want solutions brought to them. Like they don't want you to go in there and say like, hey, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this too. Like they don't want someone to be like, hey, like, you know, like what's going on? Like what's going bad? They want you to come in and be like, hey, we already know how this is going. This is what we can do differently to make your life easier, to mitigate risk, better ROI, all that stuff. They want that brought to them.
And I think the other thing that I tried to do when I was the customer, if small businesses or large businesses came to see me, they would like to bring me that really nice white paper that's 25 or 30 pages long, and I would explain to them that that's great, I can hand that off to my technical teams, but let's spend the 45 minutes that you're going to be here and write on the whiteboard and show me what is in this paper, because then I can go hand it to them and have an understanding of what you're communicating that you're really going to deliver. Right, give your customer that visual piece instead of so much of the conversation, and I think you start to then get the dialogue and the buy-in of they really are realizing what their gap is, because you're helping to show them not just that you're going to bring them something, but let them talk through that whiteboard session where you're helping to close the gaps for them.
Well, I think you both touched on something important, right, from the technology side. We've won so many deals just because a lot of times the customer, the RFP that comes up is not really the solution they want.
Right.
They just didn't know how to write it. And there's a disconnect between the contracting office and the actual customer. Mm-hmm. And so the RFP you get that comes out doesn't really say what the problem really is. So that's where capture has become like critical to getting inside information on, well, not inside like we're going to jail type inside.
Right.
Getting like little secret details, right, to kind of help shape that response in a way that will resonate with them,
Correct.
to really solve the problem based on, not necessarily on what the RFP is asking, because sometimes they're disconnected.
And I think one of the things I learned during the second year that I was at Accenture, when you talk about the chess game of business development, I was the director of military health for Accenture and ASM Research on the DHA side primarily, but also the VA side. And we had started 18 months, previously looking at an opportunity that we were going to go after that dealt with theater medicine. And we had put a lot of effort into BD and capture. But as we continued to talk to the customer and understand what they really wanted, and then brought those answers back to our leadership helped inform a decision for us not to continue to go after that opportunity after investing the 15 months going after it. That was a big lesson for me as well, and really seeing how large companies, medium and small companies are spending so much time and effort, dollars and resources to be able to go after a opportunity. But if you're not ready, it doesn't matter how large your company is. If you really can't deliver, you got to pull out, even at the 15, 18 month point of investing in something.
So this is where it's sort of all coming together, right? So a lot of what we've talked about is, so yes, there's the three-dimensional chess that you have to play. You have to also be able to play checkers. And it sounds like you also have to be ready to play Call of Duty from time to time. But it's all of it, right? It's not just one thing. It sounds like you've got to be able to, yes, be able to plan for what might be coming up. You also have to be flexible and agile to be responsive to things that might pop up. And you also have to be sort of very targeted in terms of how you can leverage relationships, capabilities, requirements, etc. All of it coming together in a sort of mosaic, if you will. It's almost so business development in the federal space sounds like it's a mosaic of different approaches that have to be brought together by some really smart people, so like yourselves. That no bid decision is something that I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into. So yes, it's all about finding ways to be able to go after something that you think you can win and that you want to be able to win, but there are times where you have to say, step back and walk away, right? So give us some of your thoughts about those examples that you might have faced in the past.
Well, I think in the opportunity where we made the decision to no bid, we had 10 smaller companies that were on our team. And it was very hard for me to rationalize that those 10 companies plus ours were not going to be able to bring the things that they do really well to this solution that was going to be awarded. And I was very emotionally tied to the solution because of my time of being in the military and wanting our theater medicine capabilities to be the best. And so I think it gave me some of that three-dimensional piece of knowing if you just throw a team together and you're putting your resources in there and you go after something and you win it, great. But when you've got technical capabilities that have had chief technology officers and others bringing them to the table and they are amazing and now they're not going to be in the winning proposal no matter what, that's hard. It's a lot of responsibility, and knowing that you have to know your craft because now what gets built, what gets awarded may not be the best.
The theater's going to break both our hearts in the long run.
Right. Yeah, because it's a very powerful, piece of knowing that who the customer is. If you know who your customer is and where they want to be able to take care of, in this case where we spend a lot of time in DOD and VA, take care of the service member or the veteran, and we sell them short. It's not a fun day.
Well, so you brought up something that I think the nuance of how many teaming people you had, right? That's part of, because that was when you were with Accenture, that was large,
Right.
And they have all these small business requirements
Right.
that the government puts out, because that was the hard part too. When I was with General Dynamics is, you know, we might be going after a big multi-$100 million deal, but the customer comes back and says, well, you need to have 30% small business, right? So you have to go find all these small businesses to put in, and not necessarily that you need them there, but it adds a whole other element to the solutioning.
Right.
And it complicates everything. Too many hands in the cookie jar sometimes is not a good thing, right?
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I think it's a point that as I start to grow a company, I definitely want to keep that in the back of my mind about, you know, what you're really doing in your strategies. And I would say that it's probably a conversation that we should have more often about, you know, utilizing your chief technology teams to their greatest ability and listening when they say that, you know, somebody is not ready to provide the value that you're hoping that they do. And just bringing them on because they fill a gap, again, may not get you to the right proposal and ultimately the win.
Yeah, you're going to find more no bids like that after a lot of upfront pre-work at large businesses, just because, you know, most of the time they have like shareholders and that sort of thing, and they have to go through all these other capture activities and check all these boxes that they've done absolutely all their due diligence. Every stone has been over, you know, looked under. Everything's been kind of gone through to make sure like this bid that's going in there with our name on it as like GDIT or a Leidos or someone like that, like that it's going to be a good proposal, right? They don't want their name being submitted on anything that's not like a blue proposal. So they'll throw it out. Like small businesses, like when we run into that as a small business, it's usually loss of like a key personnel. So say there was like a key personnel requirement, right? You're unable to find these people that you got contingent offers with that are in place with the proper skill sets and stuff necessary, you know, or you do have it and they back out. You know, most of the time it's going to be something like that or a partner, right? Like we recently bid something where one of our anchor large businesses that was going to support us was called out for a potential OCI. Fortunately, the contracting office said there's no OCI and it went in our favor, but if that would have happened, I mean, we would have had to pull our bid just because they, you know, they held so much of the technical solution and expertise that we needed and the people with the certifications to be successful. Like we couldn't have taken on that ourselves, and we know we wouldn't have gone, so we would have killed it. But you know, it would, looking at bids like that and no bids, it's kind of like a Scrum methodology. Like you want to fail fast, right? Like if you know, like once you know, like all right, you know, this probably isn't going to happen. Like kill it, use your cycles elsewhere, go after other things. Don't, I mean, unless like you think that there's like a really good chance you can backfill that person or that company or something with the time still allowed. I mean, kill it and then focus elsewhere, because if not, you know, it's going to use up more of your time cycles. It's going to be more of a morale killer and all of that stuff.
And that's especially true for small business, right?
Yes.
So I mean, there's no, small businesses don't have unlimited time, resources, money to spend on a bid and proposal effort that may not succeed, right? So you want to go after those that have a greater opportunity or greater percentage of possibility of win. And if it looks like you may not win, then it's probably better to pull the trigger and just back out early. So we talked about the who's, the network and the people you know. We've talked about the what's, the technology, core capabilities, etc. We've talked about the how's, the vehicles and the certifications and socioeconomics and stuff like that. In your opinion, and then we're going to go open up for questions, so start thinking about questions if you have any. In your opinion, how would they rank in a given opportunity, or is it really opportunity dependent? The network, the capabilities, and the house.
I think it's opportunity dependent. Like there is no cookie cutter solution to any of this. Everything, at least from what I've learned, is when it comes to BD, for me, from my perspective, capture is very important to me. I want capture to go do their job and to go get all the intel they can get so that they can feed me as much as I can to write the right solution for them. Capture is critical to me. And it varies, right? Sometimes somebody mentioned in an earlier panel about big ding deals. You know, capture should be able to go in there and see how real that is, right? So you do a no bid and don't waste resources on something that was put out for somebody else.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you said, like knowing the solution up front, right? Like a lot of agencies now are shifting to like a low-code, no-code environment, right? Like, which tool do they want? Is it like ServiceNow? Is it Salesforce? Is it Appian? Like, there's all these other things, right? And depending on if your capture team went in and actually found, you know, the software vendor or whatever that's had a bug in the customer's ear that knows that, hey, it's going to be this technology. I mean, you might propose an awesome solution and everything, but if the VA's already said, like, okay, we want this to be Salesforce, like, it's going to be Salesforce, regardless of how good your technical solution is with your, you know, even if it's cheaper and everything like that, like if they got sold on something by an OEM technology provider, like knowing to choose that solution and write to that in your proposal is key.
I concur. I think that it is dependent, but the piece of knowing if an agency is wedded to something until they get to a future point in time, it's a lot of times it can be your best friend that you're trying to talk to about that particular way ahead, but they are not the decision maker. And so you have to respect that and understand how to bring them the tool they want today.
Excellent. So let's take advantage of the opportunity. Let's open it up for questions. Jose?
Yeah, one of the things that has not been talked about today by any of us is how devastating it is for a small business or an entrepreneur. Not the first time they win, but the first time they win and they get a protest. Tell us your experience with that and what happens and how should they move on from that. Because it happens. And the first time, it could kill a small business or it could make them.
So I've been at one company when we were small. And large. Yeah, well, and large. But like the one that hits home the most, and fortunately it didn't drag out that long. We won a very large, again, IDIQ. This is back in 2016, so the Kingdomware Rule of Two had just gone in there. We're like, this is great, like we're an SDVOSB, like we're gonna kill it. And then we get a protest, and then we're like, oh no, right? Fortunately, the protest went in our favor. It only drug out we only lost 3 months, so we were okay. The company I'm at now, same vehicle, right? It was on an on-ramp. That protest went on for a year, right? So that's hard. They lost a lot of resources. Because people are uncertain, right? They're like, how long is this going to go on? So, you lose some of your technical talent because it was an IT services vehicle. So you'll feel that. Another one, I have friends that have their own companies, right, that have gone through protests, and it's drug out 6 months. Again, they've lost people because people are like, I don't know if I have a job. Like your contingent offers, go and find work elsewhere. So it's tough, right? It can make or break the company.
I was fortunate many years ago to work with a gentleman who had retired from the military and then become a government service member, and then finally had gone to industry. And so he had lived, in all of these different domains. And I was a young major. And his name was Orlando Ely, or Ely, very big in the MC4 world when we were rolling out the electronic health record to theater. And he would pull me aside and say, Bev, no matter how wedded you are to this and how much you want this to work, it is business and not personal at the end of the day. And you have got to learn that. And when he shared that with me as a young major in my career, I had not worked with a lot of government service and contract personnel. I'd spent most of my time at that point still around other military members. But I tried to keep pure to remembering that, because when you go into a protest, you see people who get very offended because it has happened. And you've got to be able to understand that there's a reason that they protested. If you're the company that's being protested against, they have their ability to go through this process for the right outcome and the right end state. And so I have not had to experience it yet as a one-person company that's going to grow, but I hope in the future that I can keep that in mind, that we need to let the process play out, because ultimately you want the customer to know that even if it was protested, if it gets awarded after 6 months or a year, it was awarded because it was adjudicated and the right outcome took place.
Any other questions? And if we don't get questions, we're gonna pick people out by name, so.
With that too as well, with the protest on the, so.
We got a mic coming up. You have a mic coming
Contract
up.
officer
Yeah,
as well. Oh, sorry. So,
Turn it on. Turn it on. Can you hear me? Yeah.
so as a contracting officer, it is frustrating for us when we receive a protest, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Make sure everything's documented, and it has to be documented to the T, to the I, in order for us to get past that protest. And a lot of times, these small businesses will lose out or get disenfranchised, when things happen like this. So, just hold on, keep going with the process. It'll get it finally adjudicated at the end of the deal. So, yeah.
Thank you. Other question?
Could one of you, for this amateur individual, explain what a protest is, how it happens, and then what you do to respond? And I'll give you the mic after.
It's you probably.
Yeah, I mean, so typically a protest, right? So there's been a contracting acquisition. It's gone into submission, right? So all the people, interested parties, have submitted their proposals. They're being evaluated, and then it gets so there's multiple types of protests. The most common one is going to be a post-award protest, right? So it gets awarded to a company, and then people that bid on it that also had like a vested interest in the opportunity will go in and say, it should not have been awarded to them. Here are the reasons why. So it's an actual legal procedure where there's lawyers involved, the contracting office gets involved, and they have their lawyers, and then you kind of it's almost like a trial, right? It goes there, and the contracting office and their team go through everything and make sure, like, no, this was the proper awardee. If not, then they'll kind of rethink things, and it could go elsewhere. There's a couple things that happen too because of size, right? So like in the VA, there's that rule of 2 that I mentioned. So there's been times when there's been opportunities and there's been more than 2 SDVOSB companies that submitted a response to the RFI. The opportunity, when it comes out, still comes out fair opportunity, so large businesses can, they can still bid on it. So if it gets awarded to a large business, then one of the small companies that knows, hey, they got more responses. Why didn't it go, based on the Kingware law? Why didn't it go set aside? That's kind of grounds for a protest, right? Because theoretically, it should have gone small. So why didn't it? So that's just kind of like a scenario. But does that make sense?
Yes.
And I would say, and it costs a lot of money.
Yes.
At the point in time that your company makes a decision to protest, you've got to have your legal teams ready to go, and you've got so many days after the award is announced to bring it together. So it's a big spin up to make sure that you're going to move forward with filing the protest, and then it can go on for such a long time, like 6 months, 9 months. We just, with the enterprise IT systems integration contract with the DHA, it went on 11 months. And one winner, an IDI, not a multiple award IDIQ, and so they lost a lot of, the winning team lost a lot of key people over that year because they went to other jobs, and then they had to defend against the protest as well. So it can be very expensive.
That was protested 4 times.
4 times.
4 times.
And if you're the company that's protesting, the protester, I mean, that's a hard decision because on paper it's not supposed to matter, but in the real world, I mean, you might burn bridges.
Yeah, but that was the battle of the larges, right?
Yeah.
We're talking, that was big companies battling over that. Usually if it's a small that's involved, if there is a protest, it's probably pretty legit.
Yeah.
More so than
Yeah.
the big ones. It's
Big
kind of,
guys.
they're like, well, I know, a lot of egos.
Yeah. But that's a good point too about the burning bridges. Like, not saying all contracting officers, but I mean, we've heard stories about people protesting and it, upsets the contracting office, and then they kind of get like a black mark. So now when a proposal comes across their desk, they're like, you protested last time. I'm like, nope.
Right. You're right.
Yeah, that's, on paper it's not supposed to happen, in the real world, that's what it is. Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so I was gonna say a good strategy for small businesses just starting out what one of my mentors told me to do would be to go after very small contracts, like products, and probably quantities about like 20, 30. Like for example, like this camera, they have contracts for about like 10 cameras just like this. Because they were saying that a good way to get experience is doing very, very small contracts. That way, you versus a competitor, you have like 10 contracts versus someone with like 0. Because when you think about contracts, a lot of these contracts are like 6, 7, 8, and you can't just get that just starting out. So a good strategy would be to go after like very, very small contracts. But I think the biggest problem is just having access, because there's a multitude of different platforms that have RFPs and different solicitations, and it's just a matter of finding them and having access to them.
And part of this, I appreciate you framing it that way, because as I get my certification for SWAM, which is the Small Women and Minority, it's state and local government, right? So there are a lot of smaller wins that I can look at on that stream and start to grow my past performance. And so that is on that 3-year, 5-year plan that I'm building out to make sure that I'm really watching where those opportunities might present themselves. So I agree that that's a great strategy if you've got the time to go and start small and really grow your craft.
Networking is also important for small starting.
Yes.
Right? You know, there's a lot of networking events that are free. And you start meeting a lot of people. I think you admitted earlier to stalking somebody on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
So you can go on LinkedIn and find out all these events that are going on.
Yeah.
So just you can start meeting other small business owners, or you know, a lot of times like we've been talking. There might be a large that they have a small business requirement, and so they're just looking for these small businesses to meet that requirement. You might be able to, you know, get in there.
Yeah, you can go on Eventbrite, like if you know the Eventbrite site where you can like register for things, you can just search in there, like, you know, DC metro area, you can just type in like veteran or like government, and it'll give you all the stuff, and a lot of them are free happy hours. Again, you know, all like the GovCon free media blogs, they post events there and everything. But yeah, that example.
You host one. You plug yours in.
Oh yeah.
You host the T4G one.
Shameless plug. So so I run the Department of Veterans Affairs IT kind of networking event. So we do it monthly. It's always the last Wednesday of every month. From 5 to 8, we usually have big prime companies. I actually think your company is hosting the next one.
Yeah.
So we take off in November and December because of the holidays. Next one will be end of January, hosted by PingWind. So yeah, I mean, CGI hosted the last one, Google's there, but we have a bunch of prime subs, people looking to do work, big companies, small companies, anyone. And it's not just all VA based, we get a lot of other companies too.
A lot of times GD too. So
Yep.
Yeah.
come drink a lot, bring your bill up. They can afford
And
it.
I would say, you know, Eric and I have known each other ancillarily over the years, but because I was in the DHA and he was VA, we had not spent a lot of time together. I had not gone to a lot of T4 and G happy hours over the last couple of years, and so being able to go earlier in the summer and then walk in and be able to actually talk with Eric about what his company's doing has allowed me to have some opportunities I would have never had if I had not gone to that happy hour that one night. And so it really is about stepping outside of your comfort zone and slowing down and talking to people and finding out, you know, where they need something that y'all might be able to help each other with.
So your liver is a small price to pay in order.
Right.
But it's
You
true.
don't have to drink.
That's true. Yes, you can go for tonic water. But it's a good point in terms of also not just getting contracts and getting revenue in the door, but also getting prime contracts, right? So there's the balance between being in as a sub and then having, even if it's small, having prime contracts under your belt. So it's a good point. Questions?
Hope I can say it right. And then the mic works. Okay. What is the biggest issue when a contracting officer releases an RFP? You know, issues or concerns that they can do better. You know, when you look at a service or a supply, when you're looking at it, when it's finally released into the open market, what are the biggest issues that you may have on the solicitation?
You're a contracting officer?
Yes.
Do you when you work on those RFPs, do you talk to the customer? Do you guys communicate?
For my part, when I teach my Marines, we sit down with the customer requiring activity. What is exactly what you need? It has to be very clear and concise to the open market in order for them to provide the correct pricing of what we need. So a lot of times I'll talk to a lot of contractors, say lessons learned, right? Once I release that award, I want to get some feedback from them. And typically what I get from them is sometimes the performance work statement is not clear or not clearly defined in what they're wanting. So from your aspect, from the company perspective, do you still have those challenges, and do you guys ask those questions back to the contracting officers for clarifications? Go ahead.
So I have a recommendation based off of this last 4 months and seeing just how many webinars and in-person venues that you can go to that are free. If you take the time if you've got a young staff that you're trying to grow and to understand a sector, whether it's VA, DHA, or any of the 3-letter agencies, giving them a chance to go to some of these venues in this area so that they can participate in the webinars, the training, and get a feel for how we're trying to groom them to be better in their expertise as a contracting official. I think that would help give them a chance to talk to industry as well as talk to the customer more.
No, I completely agree. I mean, one of the biggest things, from my perspective, I always try to teach the Marines. So teaching my guys, for either civilians that are underneath my charge, or the Marines that are contract specialists on these, large value contracts, is like you have to be very clear and concise and bring the acquisition plans with the requiring activity and sit down kneecap to kneecap to really define that requirement. So, a lot of times we'll do Defense Acquisition University, or we get these webinars. For me, it's a training platform for me to continue to teach those future contracting officers when they put out these RFPs to industry. So from your all perspective, sometimes you have to teach those guys or teach us how to do it right.
My biggest pet peeve from the technology side is you use the word be innovative in your response, right? But you have to stick to the L&M sections to get scored.
Yep.
So you really do not have that flexibility of freedom to do that innovation piece. So, it's like, I don't know how to solve that problem, but it would be nice for these to come out and have an area where you can be innovative, where you can put yourself out there and put out a really cool solution that's not going to that's outside of the L&M and not get scored that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I got you.
That's my, as a technologist, right, that's the part that every time I read it, I'm like, they don't really want innovation. We got to stick to these things, right, so that we can score good.
Yeah, and that's like the fine line too, right? Because you might have a really cool idea, but it scares off.
I
the
always
customer.
have really cool ideas, man.
And then they're like, oh, whoa, like we're not going to do that. Like we want innovation. We want it like within this box, right?
Yeah.
So I think industry engagement too, like market research up front too, is huge. COVID was tough. Like being like a BD person during COVID was hard. Everyone's at home. No one feels like getting out of their PJs. All these customers are just getting hammered with calls, right? So they don't want to be on calls all day. They have work that they have to do. So really getting those meetings that we used to kind of have organically through like networking events and things as they would be out, like they didn't happen. So it made it a lot harder, and then they would stop picking up their phones. Like a year into COVID, they're like, I'm just done talking to industry, like it's not gonna happen anymore. So now kind of getting out there more and seeing more people, it's making it easier again, but like market research up front is huge because then that kind of alleviates that, right?
Not that it's feasible or possible, but a small business owner's wish list dream would be for there to be a checkbox on a particular RFP that says, no, really, this isn't wired for a particular vendor. We need it this time, right? If there were a checkbox that says that, that'd be great. The other thing is, if we can do away with LPTA, that's as a concept, that would be great. But
I completely agree. But LPTA or best value, the trade-offs. So more and more you'll see LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable.
Yeah.
And now with things that are moving on, You'll see that more and more, that just to make it easier.
It just makes it hard for small business, because, you know, big businesses can have a particular opportunity as a loss leader, because they've got other things, but it's hard for a small business. Jackie, you have a question?
I have many questions. But, so LPTA, just to put a couple of comments on the LPTA, it really all depends on the evaluation criteria, because it's really not just the lowest cost, it's based on how you've been scored and your pricing.
Yep.
So you have to really be concerned about everything that you're doing. And then we just lost one actually. And I was almost positive we were gonna win it, but somehow there was a little spin somewhere that we didn't see. We lost it.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't like those.
Let's make this the last one.
Yeah, question,
I'm not holding, sorry, pull it away from me.
are you sure? Well, you can hold it. When the infrastructure bill went through, the other thing that went through was Executive Order 13985, which is the new one that set goals of doing business with disadvantaged communities, minority communities and so on, and underserved disadvantaged communities from 5% to 11% right now, and it's going up to 15% by 2025. Can you talk about that and tell us what's going on there?
I know nothing about those coming out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. I know that SBA was reevaluating their criteria for like woman-owned, minority-owned, even hub zone, and all the percentages were going up, but I'm not.
Well, it passed earlier this year, like around April, maybe could have been February, and they've increased they set aside the increase what goes to minorities and underserved communities to 11% right now, their goals, and to 15%, and it will go higher by 2030 if whatever stays in there. I don't know who's going to turn it around or not, but right now it's in play right now, and a lot of folks don't know about it. Maybe a contractor can tell us a little bit about it if he's heard about it, but that's going on right now because some of them are already using it, and I know for a fact that the minority MBDA Government Procurement Center here in Washington, D.C. is already promoting it, and so are some of the SBA business centers around the country, which there are several. Because I know the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce got 5 of them around the country, and I know the Black Chamber got some, and there's some of the other folks. If you don't know about it, it's something you should investigate, and I know that ALVA should look into it so they could get it out to its members, because it's new.
So I saw the summary that it had passed. I watched over the summer where those percentages were going, and those were the ones that I saw, 5, 11, and up to 15% in the next 24 months.
Yes.
And I have not seen as much about it being tied to the disadvantaged communities, but I haven't read the entire bill.
That's what it was done. It says so right there in there. You know, to make, and the words they use is to create equity in the disadvantaged communities and so on. You know, so look it up. It's Executive Order 13985.
That might be something that we follow up with in terms of getting it out to through ALVA, either through a podcast or some of the other information.
Because that'll increase the contract.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My name is Diana Price. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency with OSDBU. I overheard in the other room. So you are correct. It's coming from the administration, the body administration for SDBs, small disadvantaged businesses. We want to say it's also including 8As, but which an 8A is a small disadvantaged business, so that is included in it per se. So each federal agency is going to have their goals for SDBs, and you are correct, it is going to be raised up to 15%, but there are some agencies that is depicted to have more than 15%. So for instance, EPA was at 17%, 17.5, 17.8 this past fiscal year. And right now, SBA and EPA are negotiating what the percentage will be for fiscal year 23.
Thank you very much. before we wrap up, our next segment or section is going to be around matchmaking. If you're on the buyer side of the house, raise your hand. And so we'll be having tables on the side here. EPA, Department of Transportation, I think Department of Commerce is over here. If you're a vendor or a small business, that's where you'll be for the next hour and a half or 2 hours or so. In the meantime, there will be refreshments on the other side of the wall. And then final thing is, if I can have all of the previous panelists and this panel to come together for a large picture. And if you're on the advisory council for ALVA, please come forward for a group picture. And in the meantime, thank you again, once again. A round of applause for our panel. Stay for our awards reception this evening that starts at about 6:45. Thank you again very much.